So I had to get some coffee. So continuing on, I have put together for you, uh, I call it the map, a legend exploration. And I got that title from, I have this huge map of the United States on one of my walls here at the house. And, you know, it's pretty cool. I've had it for a long time, and it's this really big wall map of the history of the United States, and it shows, you know, the pioneers and all those things. And it's really neat because on the side, on the legend, it has a legend of exploration. And for me, it was very inspiring because as I go along and create the maps, which we're going to share with you here on video, you get a chance to see that, what these look like, I realized that it really is the following through this is a map of the psychology. It is what I call the self-portrait of the horse. And you know, the legend of it is all these different symbols and signals and things about stress and areas. I had to find a way to mark these down, you know, on paper, jot this down, and have it quantified so that it could be repeated. And the only way for me to do that was to create a legend, a map legend, if you will. So it really is the map, a legend of exploration. Now I'm going to read to you what I have here. And again, I just want to say, just remind you that a transcript of this, if you don't get it all here in the video, a transcript of what I'm reading to you today is on the blog. The title for the blog is Century Mapping, a Legend of Exploration. And that will be on the blog, on the website. You can check that out, and you can, you know, look at it as often as you want and share it with everyone that you'd like to share it with. So one of the most important things we look for are stress markers, bridges and blocks, okay? Now let's think about, we go back to each zone, you know, these different zones. These are measurements within the zones that I'm talking about here that put together the whole picture of the horse, that map the whole horse. And I use arrows. Arrows pointing out from the body indicate locations of natural outsourcing tendency. These areas are pull points or pull, and I call them pull points. It pulls energy out. The horse's emotional energy is pulled outward. You know, they're falling into this space. They are trying to outsource. They're trying to figure it out. They are seeking a bridge point. Naturally seeking of a bridge point is outsourcing, okay? Seeking a bridge point while trying to complete the sensory sequence, all right? They're asking a question. Here is where you bridge by answering the question with casual, now remember, this is very important. You answer the question with casual and whispering, matter-of-fact emotional intent. It is your emotional intention is the great communicator. You have to keep that in mind. It's not your physical action. Physical action, if required, should be after the horse asks. This is so important. When your horse, and you look at your map, and you're going to see sections in your map, and you'll see it. We'll show you some a map sample. When you see arrows pointing out, okay, that is a spot that tells you the horse is seeking information, if you will. They are outsourcing, okay? They are asking a question of the environment, and without anybody there, and without herd members there, okay, they're trying to answer it themselves, okay? It becomes an outsourcing thing that they try to bridge themselves. It is a bridge point. They're trying to sort through it. It takes more time for them to do that, okay? And their energy is in that spot. Okay, when their energy is in that spot, it is not dispersed in other places throughout the body as evenly, all right? So they become emotional blind spots, if you will. We have to keep that in mind. I'm going to read this to you again. Arrows pointing out from the body indicate locations of natural outsourcing tendency. These areas are pull points or pull. The horse's emotional energy is pulled outward, seeking a bridge point while trying to complete the sensory sequence. Here is where you bridge by answering the question with casual and whispering matter-of-fact emotional intent. And physical action, if required, only if required, should be after the horse asks. And very important, if you try to answer the question or give a physical action before the horse completes asking his question, let the horse complete their sentence, if you will. If you cut them off, okay, think about you're talking to someone and you have an idea, or you're kind of considering something, and you're voicing your opinion, and boom, they cut you right off and they kick back with something else. That creates a block. How does that make you feel? You know, it's an abrupt change of your thought pattern, and that becomes a block. If you're not being the bridge, you're being the block. Okay, and when you do not let your horse complete their sentence and ask that question before you answer it, you are now becoming a block. Now, there are going to be places on your map that, of course, I'm going to write down has leaks. Leaks are non-outsourcing areas steadily draining the horse of emotional energies. Sometimes they just have, if you think of a balloon and it has little pinholes in it around the body of the balloon, around the fabric of the balloon, air just slowly leaks out. It's like having a tire on your car or your truck. It has a nail in it, and it's a slow kicking out of that. That's an energy leak, okay? It's a pressure leak. And energy leaks happen because there is excess emotional stress and pressure within the horse's psychology, but it has it's kind of like a teapot boiling on the stove, and it starts to hiss, and it's leaking out. That is a residual energy leak. It is not an outsourcing leak. Okay, it's not an outsourcing effort. This is important to understand. This is why I write these down and map this out, because if we try to answer a leak, then we're not doing the horse any kind of service whatsoever. He's not outsourcing, he or she is not outsourcing in that area, okay? Again, this is very important stuff, and there's just so many elements to this that are just fascinating and can help on so many levels. Okay, so now we have the opposite. Arrows pointing into the body indicate inward pressure points called push points, or push. And you'll see my chicken scratch on these maps, and I'll have these arrows and these chicken scratch words, as I call it, my carry hieroglyphics. These are areas where emotional energy is condensed and presses into the horse. Accumulative stressors can create internal sensory sequence blocks, requiring more time for the horse to self-bridge, either through the associative aspect or through anticipatory response mechanism. All right. Here is where you offer a bridge of firm emotional intent before the horse blocks and preceding physical action and asks. What do I mean by that? When you see marks on your map of the pressure going in, all right, that is a really strong pressure point inside the horse. Okay, that is a block. That is a sensory block. That is an internal block that the horse has in there. There's stimulus coming in that is not being processed. It is putting extra pressure, and it is inhibiting the horse's sensory function, and is accumulating stress inside the body. And this causes a lot of problem. When you see this on the map, and you know that there's stimulus in that area, this is where you need to be ahead of it. You need to answer the question before the horse can ask it, before it heads to a block. Okay, help the horse. This is where you lay the bridge. You're the engineer. Okay, these push points are places that you need to be hyper vigilant about. And you lay the foundation for that. And how do we do that again? It is through emotional intent. Emotional intent. Here is where you offer a bridge of firm emotional intent before the horse blocks and preceding physical action or ask. Okay, again, you need to do this right before you're going to ask. If you're going to turn the horse to the right, you're going to turn the horse to the left, out of an area that is creating a block for them. Okay, you need to do that. Firm emotional intent has to precede the physical action, because you cannot lead with physical action before emotional intent. It confuses the horse. No matter what you do, physical is not a leadership characteristic. Emotional is the leadership characteristic. Whatever you do, whatever your horse is, whether there are pushes or whether there are blocks, your emotional intent leads the way. Your emotional intent casually lays a bridge for the outsourcing points, and you answer that question after they ask it. If you know that the horse has pressure points, you want to circumvent them even having to ask the question by creating a bridge before that. But you do not do either one of those things with a physical cue first. Okay, remember, your emotional intentions say a lot to the horse, and your capacity, the energy with which you put into that says a lot to the horse. Okay, outsourcing, answering the question for the horse on the pull points. Okay. Needs to be done at a casual but firm, okay? The areas that you have a lot of stress coming in, you have to be even more firm and more forthright in a firm emotional intention before that has a chance to block up the horse, okay? Very, very important stuff. The other highly important part of every single horse that I talk about a lot is a sensory lead change. Now, granted, I have a lot of terminology in my own lexicon, if you will, with herd dynamics and sensory mapping and sensory soundness. So, as many of you do know, there is a free glossary of terms and terminology and phrases on the website at the resources area. So feel free to check that out. A lot of these terms will be on there for you. And if you're looking at the transcript, there'll be an asterisk, excuse me, next to a lot of these things that you can go look at on the glossary. Sensory lead change. Again, a century lead change is the transition of information from one zone to the next. You got the here's the century lead change marker. Zone, information going this way around the horse has to transition from this to this. It's not coming in and out of the zone. All right. The first part of the arrows, we're talking about the pressure coming in and out of the zone, or the horse going in and out of the zone emotionally. Century lead changes are about the stimulus and the pressures in the environment going left to right, basically around the horse in a circle. Okay, but it's crossing into different zones, not going in and out of them. So this horse has to successfully transition that stimuli from one zone to the next across that line. Again, there are 6 standardized zones around the horse's body. Century lead change. So my markers for this, my indicators are HF. You'll see high functioning elite century lead change capacity. If you see HF, that's very good. If you see OK, that means average efficiency during stimulus transition, a normal century lead change. It's good. It's nothing wrong with it. It's not high functioning. High functioning is going to be equated to a high level athlete where things happen very quickly, racehorses, things like that, things where action has to happen very, very fast and has to match physical motion, and the horse still has to clear space as the body moves faster and faster. You need higher functioning century lead changes to do that successfully. Then we get to, I have arrows pointing out from each other, okay? When you see an arrow, 2 arrows pointing out from each other, this indicates delays in transition. This is where additional time to hand off information is required. Whenever you see that on your map, you're going to say, well, okay, in this particular area, when a stimulus is going through this zone into this other zone through this century lead change, I need to give my horse more time. Or if my horse is moving towards something, I may need to alter my pace to match that. Again, this whole thing is predicated upon finding the right physical pace and mental rhythm to keep that space. There is a mental rhythm and a physical movement. Okay, we need to match these things up so we have that cushion. And we're better able to do that when we understand the functionality of the century sequences and how fast and how rapid things are working and where. Then there's another indication that I have. It's 2 arrows pointing, it's pulling through from one zone to the next. And this is what I call emotional drag. It's dragging the stress across. This is the tendency for accumulation of stress via stress carryover. Stress carryover is on the glossary, and it is essentially, the short version of it is where accumulated stresses in one zone carry over and get pulled into the next zone and compound that, okay? It puts extra pressure into that zone that wasn't even supposed to be there. It was supposed to be processed, all right? These are all psychological functions that in a normal sequence would happen very rapidly in a high-functioning horse. But as you go along, not every horse is able to function that way. Some horses have high-functioning central lead changes in certain zone markers, and then very delayed ones and very average or below average ones in others. And it's important to know what that is, because why is my horse one way on this side and the other way on this side? Well, there's a reason for that, and the mapping process shows you. How do I allocate these, and how do I mark these lead changes, these locations? The up to 6 standard century lead change transition points are denoted A through F. So I give them letters. And at the end of each one of those, there'll be a letter on your map, A through F. Now, zone areas, part of the process of me looking at this is understanding, what the zone area is. So, again, in the normal map, in a high level map, you'll see that the zone areas are very equally spaced as far as correspondence goes. This side is very equally spaced to its corresponding. We have to check the zones, how big they are in scope and range, okay? A condensed zone, scope and range creates additional pressure and accumulative stress. So the smaller the zone is, okay, if it's a condensed zone, in scope and range, okay, that means to me that, there's extra pressures can accumulate in here. It is a funnel. Think of water going through a hose. The smaller the hose, the faster the water is the more pressure you're going to have of the water coming out. The bigger the hose, the more opening you have, the same amount of water is going to come out as a more even a trickle. Okay, the bigger the pipeline. But the smaller, the more condensed, the more pressure you're going to have. It's the same kind of thing. Zone exaggeration, again, this is the same process. A zone exaggeration of scope and range causes delays in response times. So one speeds up, the more pressure in that zone, the smaller the zone, the tighter the zone, the more condensed, the more pressure, the faster information is funneling into that. which means the faster the horse is going to have to process it, which means there's a lot more chance for it to accumulate. Then there's areas that is real wide, okay? And it's kind of like ho-hum, it's coming in at a trickle almost, and these are going to be delays in response time. So some parts of the horse are going to create a very rapid response because of the pressure, and some areas of the horse where things are happening or that you ask them to go into or move past are going to cause a delayed response. They might even get stuck to it as they go through it and try to process it. That's a real wide, exaggerated zone aspect. Okay, in areas that are the zone area of sensory soundness for efficient egg and sequencing, where things are functioning properly and functioning very well, or functioning nominally, I'm going to have a line with two basically brackets, two parenthesis markers. Okay, that indicates the area of zone, basically zone efficiency and zone sequencing. I value these in 4 different levels. Okay, so there's good. It's good. It doesn't have any push or pull, but actually, how good is it? All right. So I have corresponding values for these, and there's 4 of them. Values A is athletic and elite in that particular part of the zone. Value B is for average, above average. Value B is above average. Pretty good functioning. C is average to good, and D is adequate. I don't have anything below adequate in here because that wouldn't be the mark. It would be a different mark. All right, it would be a push or pull or something like that. But so there's A, athletic elite, B, above average, C, average to good, D, adequate. Again, this is the mapping legend for you. You'll see these, and when you get a map done, you're going to have access to this, and you're going to look at this and say, okay, this is what's happening here, here, and here, along with a very comprehensive report. This is a very abbreviated action. The other thing that I look for is balance. Balance is uniformity of corresponding zones. Example, zones 3, zone 5, the corresponding on the other side of the horse. There's 2 halves of the horse. If the corresponding zone is the same size as each other, corresponding zones, and they have a minimum value of C, which is average to good functionality within that aspect, within that particular part, that is balance. Okay, and balance is in charge of the guardrails for the horse, left to right. Those are your guardrails. And again, though, it's not just left and right. It's front to back. It's on the obliques. Horses see the world in a circle, for the most part. So it is a circular world. The balance of the zones, and the zones are compartmentalized in such a way to allow the horse to be linear in a circular view. Psychologically, it helps them stay in straight lines, okay, to put a very fine point on it. And balance is in charge of keeping that straight and keeping that balance and harmony on left to right side of the horse. Okay, horses that are off balance on their map are going to be off balance psychologically and emotionally. Now, I talk a lot about the egg, and I'm going to give you a quick tips. I wrote this in here. I thought this was really important. And again, for those of you who have signed up for the online course, Understanding Sensory Soundness, lesson 2 is underway, and we're going to be talking in great detail about the sensory egg. But I'm going to give you the quick and the dirty here on this egg quick tips. The egg, which is the sphere around the horse, the egg represents the range and depth perception and scope of emotional awareness. So the egg represents range of depth perception, the range of it, and the scope, left to right, the width, the scope of emotional self-awareness. So basically, it's where am I relative to where you are? An essential component that allows for accurate interpretive ratio. How fast are you or I, or you and I, moving relative to one another? Let me say this again, because this is very important. The whole interpretive ratio. How fast are you or I, or you and I, moving relative to one another? It is the horse's ability to keep space between themselves and an object that's moving, or between them moving towards an object, or both objects moving, themselves included. This is very, very important. So that is what the depth perception and the emotional self-awareness does. Psychologically, range of depth perception is both in and out and up and down relative to the body. This is very important. We talk about depth perception, and we oftentimes think about looking on the ground for ourselves and can we see the depth of things like that. But depth for a horse is up and down, footing, things like that, things on the ground, as well as in and out from the body. How far away am I to it? Things like that. That depth. How close am I to something? Okay. The ratio the interpretive ratio in a particular zone, especially zone 1, is very, very important for horses because it helps them keep that cushion. They want to keep that space between an object, or they want to know how far away they are to something. And if they don't know accurately, they're going to alter their physical pace, or they're going to act up. Scope is the area of total self-awareness within a zone. Again, the scope is the total awareness within that zone. So how efficiently am I aware of myself in that zone? It's worth noting, though, because we have a lot of horses that have a lot of associative baggage with them over the years and a lot of trauma. Self-perceived is different than self-aware, okay? And it makes a difference for the horse. One is an assumed position, the other is a known position. Self-perceived is I assume, this is my assumed position, or this is your assumed position, based upon an associative stimulus or an associative trauma or experience or learned behavior from the past. A horse that has a very efficient sensory sequence and zone efficiency becomes very self-aware. They know for a matter of fact, it is a fact that I am here and you are there. And they have a very good concept of what that is. So I'm just going to read this again. Again, this is going to be in detail in the lesson. This is going to be, you're able to go through this on the blog as well. Let me read this again. Egg quick tips. The egg represents the range of depth perception and scope of emotional self-awareness. In other words, where am I relative to where you are? An essential component that allows for accurate interpretive ratio, which is how fast are you or you and I, moving relative to one another. Psychologically, range of depth perception is both in and out and up and down relative to the body. Scope is the area of total self-awareness within a zone. Of note, self-perceived is different than self-aware. One is an assumed position, the other is a known position. Now, don't be worried about it if you don't really understand this all the way. Again, there's going to be a course on it, but in the process of me writing up your report, you will get a detail of this information, and it'll all come together with a lot more clarity. So there you have that part, and we will move on now here in a second to something I'm really excited about: the sensory soundness score.